It is so burdensome as a caregiver to carry the weight of finances and unraveling your personal assets and things like that.
All you can do is your best in any one of those scenarios to give what you have.
It is definitely like a physical and mental release for me. I notice the difference in myself when I do or don't.
People don't realize their thoughts are so powerful and what that does to you. And then you've got to go be you in the world.
I'm still trying to figure out that part of the journey.
Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. Today, I am joined by Kersten Weber Tatarelis, a nationally recognized healthcare executive who spent more than 2 decades leading large-scale clinical and operational transformation across some of the nation's largest health systems. Throughout her career, Kersten has overseen enterprise operations impacting billions of dollars in healthcare spending, led teams through complex integrations and growth initiatives, and also helped redefine how healthcare organizations create value and improve outcomes. But beyond the titles and accomplishments, Kersten is also a wife, a mother of 4, and someone who has navigated the very real challenge of balancing leadership, family, caregiving, and personal ambition. I'm excited to explore the lessons she's learned about being the go-to person for so many things and people, setting priorities, and sustaining yourself through life's many demands. Kersten, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Erin. I'm so excited to be here. It's great to
Yes. Yes. Okay. So you and I had the pleasure of meeting through the North Shore Network a while ago and just sort of instantly clicked on various levels. And we had a pretty deep conversation a little while back, which we're going to get into the topic of, which is caregiving for elderly parents and just the weight of kind of everything in life, right? All of the demands and pulls on our energy and time that we deal with, especially as working women. But I thought let's start at looking at your career from the outside. People see obviously incredible accomplishment and leadership in your career. What do they not see about the realities of your journey and sort of where you've been, what your background is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one I've tried probably in the last recent years to share a lot more of myself in that space. Because I do think there's that false perception of perfection or achievement. And certainly on paper, I've checked boxes, right? There's a lot of degrees and there's a lot of certifications and achievements. And I think as I've grown in my career, I realized like those were some necessary tasks for sure to get where I've gotten. But I think I care an awful less about that and more about, I think, the culture I've tried to cultivate in my professional journey, which is much deeper. It's a lot more about leading with true connection to purpose. Often folks who I have worked with will always hear me say that. And that's a cliche in some ways, but I think that I've tried to emulate that with my leadership style and true connection with people. I've tried to commit to that sort of with the integrity of the way in which I lead, and ensuring that I'm really following and honoring that with not just the style of my leadership, but how I cultivate teams, and grow people in their leadership so that we really create environments in which people want to show up for work, are excited about it, and feel good about the work that they're doing because they believe in it from their core.
Yeah. What would you say is one of those things about your leadership style that has had to shift over time as your personal life has shifted? So 4 children is no small feat.
No.
I mean, I'm at 2 and it's pretty hard. But I mean, also what a blessing. And so what would you say has shifted in your leadership style based on growing your family over the years and just how those responsibilities shift?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point in our lives to be able to reflect back and look at that. And in some ways, I kind of sort of laugh at myself in terms of how I led out of the gate. That high achieving, high driven mentality where I felt like I needed to enter the room sort of already knowing answers to things. I think my leadership style has completely transitioned because if nothing else, kids will show you all the things you don't know, right, in life. But that humility, that vulnerability, that transparency has totally transformed how I show up. I have a story one day where I remember showing up in a boardroom and pulling what I thought was my phone out of my purse, and a kid's underwear popped out because it was no migraine. And I was like, if this doesn't really show where I'm at in life, like I've really got checked in, So I
That's
think those
amazing.
are that like those moments, really owning them, and then just kind of leaning into it because
Mhm.
that's just reality, right? Of where we're all at and being in it with other people.
Mhm.
I think it creates a shared experience and sort of that culture I was talking about.
Yeah. And, and obviously there's no such thing as balance. We all know that word was really, it's really a myth to just make us all feel guilty. So there's no balance, but there's integration, right? And there are going to be seasons in life where it feels like everything and everyone needs you at the same time,
Mhm.
and all you can do is your best in any one of those scenarios to give what you have. But, if you don't have anything in the tank for yourself, it's really hard to give to others. So, what are some of those things in your life that are grounding or centering for you that allow you to fill yourself up so that you can take care of the people at work, take care of the people at home, and then in your extended family as well?
Yeah, this for me is something I've worked on purposefully in recent years because I will say it is easy at the sort of the peak of all of the pressure points in your life to get depleted and have nothing left, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know that I've perfected this, so I'll be the
Mhm.
first to say that this is a journey. um,
100%.
so I have even within the seasons, right, highs and
Yeah.
lows, and
Mhm.
find myself sort of retracting back to old behaviors of high performance, high energy, high continuing to sort of deplete and deplete and deplete myself, putting myself last.
Mhm.
Things that are really grounding or important to me, though, I think are like movement and working out and
Mhm.
committing to something that I think has always been important to me. But I let it go, right? It's the last thing to
Mhm.
come back onto the plate. But when I do it, it is definitely like a physical and mental release for me.
Yeah.
I notice the difference in myself when I do or don't, right? And that's not for everyone. Some people it's reading or other things. That for me is super important.
Mhm.
And then finding like cultivated family time. Look, my
Yeah.
kids are all over the place and our home is crazy loud and chaotic,
Mhm.
but just finding not like perfect moments,
Mhm.
but sort of joy in the moments that we have while we're still together. That
Mhm.
recenters my week immediately. So things like,
Yeah. Boy, that really puts it in perspective as a parent, doesn't it? When you think, okay, the time we have together, which is, oh, we only have, 6 more years as a family of four or three or two or whatever it is. It's like, I think about that at times where things are so frustrating or loud and chaotic. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't anymore. And at the
right.
same time, I'm like, but I only have X amount of years more to be in this, right? To actually be present in it. And then from there, yeah, you're still their parent, but it just changes as we know. We've lived through that. So I think that that was a really good perspective you just gave because it's easy to forget about that too, right? Easy to lose yourself in the process, but then also easy to, to not have perspective on what actually matters in the moment.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think you phrased it perfectly before that balance piece. And I think, in your book and you talk about alignment. And I think that there's
Mhm.
an element there of, there's ways to react to that. Even that comment, right? My kids are going to be gone in a few years. Maybe I should just stop all the things. I think when you realize though, like, is that alignment for you? And for me, alignment is some version of that seasonality. This is a
Yeah.
high season for my kids, and it's maybe I need to take the gas off, the pedal,
Mhm.
as it relates to work, or there's versions of that where this feels like the right alignment instead of
Yes.
misaligning for for just like the purpose of doing it.
That's so true. I mean, also, like it was funny because I was interviewing a guy earlier who was an entrepreneur and had sold a company and then it went public and what have you. And he was saying how in those years of building, he completely was misaligned because all he thought about was performance and return on investment for his investors, right? So he had kids, he had a wife, but he really had barely had time for them, no time for himself, and always put himself last. And the story that, his inner critic would tell him is that as soon as I get the company to X, then I can take care of me. And it's like,
Right.
who, like, you're not like the creator of all things that are. So who are you to say you even get there? Right.
It's
And I think that that's also like that word alignment to me is so important because I lived so many years completely misaligned with so much about myself, my truth, my values, the core of what I want out of my life, the way that I actually want to feel every day, the intentionality that I want behind how I show up. I mean, I was just going through the motions, right? And living like that is so unfulfilling in every way, not just work. It was unfulfilling at home. It was unfulfilling in my friendships. Like everything just felt empty, you know? So we don't have to get to that point to start to live our lives a little bit more intentionally. And like you said, I love how you said it, be in the seasons, like just be fully present in those. Maybe you
Mhm.
got to take the gas off somewhere else. That's okay. You're going to put that pedal down soon, right? But
Yep.
just ease up on yourself a little bit.
Yeah. And
Okay. So with that, there's so many high achieving professionals that listen to this show, right? And a lot of us are what we call that sandwich generation. And you and I have talked about this,
mhm.
you know, raising children while being in some of the peak years of our career and our earning potential. And then also having to care for elderly parents and, you know, the burden of what that is, but also the responsibility of what we feel in doing so for them. Um, so I'm curious about your story with that and whatever you'd like to share with us, because I know you've been going through that deeply, and many people have, and not everyone gets a chance to talk about it. So you know you've got some really great perspectives to share, and I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah. Um, and thank you. I do find myself in these conversations more frequently than ever now. And I do
Mhm.
think in particular, and I don't want to over stereotype, but women are burdened with it more commonly, right? Because of
Yeah.
just our sort of natural nature for caretaking and for absorbing responsibility without reward. And, you know, you can kind of go on with just why, right?
Yeah.
And that usually positions women in a family for additional responsibility. And so I think I'm not suggesting I'm unique in this, but certainly within, you know, for me personally, within the last 15 years, and actually when I was thinking about this for our conversation, I do actually think it's been much longer than that. I,
Mhm.
my mom is suffering from an atypical form of dementia, so one that allowed for her to function as a productive nurse, as a productive member of society for quite some time while
Mhm.
still suffering without us really being able to catch it and know. To be able to provide potentially the support that could have kept her more functional and kept her more integrated into society and happier in the long run.
Mhm.
But with that, I also being responsible for some of the health and the caretaking of my grandma when she was starting to become challenged with some of these, you know, some of her early onset symptoms. So
Mm.
complex executive functioning skills, you know, like
Mhm.
doing math or being able to help facilitate her moving into a care facility herself or selling her home. My
Right.
grandma
Right.
were impossible tasks for her. And had I put, you know, hindsight's 2020, right? That was really some of the early symptoms of her not being able to manage it. So she actually deferred sort of the POA to me. And I found myself in the position to have to take care of an aging grandparent at the same time of taking care of, you know, my mom who was declining and
Mhm.
newborn babies all over the place. This was
Yeah.
really the peak of my beginning of my own family.
Mhm.
And when you look back at my professional journey, I don't know if I appreciated it at the time, but this is the beginning of my true professional journey. I had
Yeah.
finished residency. I was in my first sort of leadership career, and uh, wow, did everything, you know, start to come together a lot. At that moment in time, I don't know that I appreciated what that pressure was going to sort of mount to. I'm still in it, so it
Yeah.
isn't. I think the difference of maybe what we had sort of chatted about, sort of our parents' version of the sandwich generation and ours, is that I think this feels like we have the pressure of, you know, career performance,
Mhm.
child rearing, and elder care sort of happening longer and
Yeah.
all at the same time. And whereas our mothers maybe didn't have as much of a career pressure because it wasn't really
Mhm.
offered, right? Like, you
Yeah.
know, my mom was a career woman and she was an anomaly. And
Yeah.
so I think like
Right.
that really, all of that coming together at the same point in time feels like a completely different pressure that I think women are burdened with right now. And burdened isn't even a word I want to use. It's just a challenge. It's just, it's the logistics, right? It's that emotional labor that we hear a lot about. But man, is it draining. It really is.
It's so draining. And thank you for sharing that. It's, I mean, there's so much there, and none of that is easy to talk about. So I appreciate your vulnerability. It's also something that so many people can relate to now. And we are living longer and we are performing longer because the world is also a lot more expensive than it used to be. Right. So there's very real realities about what we're saving for, what we're spending money on currently. We're raising kids and we want to send them to schools and all the things. And so it is a lot of pressure, and then at the same time to have, I know in my case, like with my mother, I don't live locally, my siblings do. So it really falls on them. But, I'll get the text messages about sending, adult diapers. And I think you and I talked about this. It's like, those things are like $85 for 16 diapers or something. It's insanity. It's absolutely insanity. But, seeing my siblings do what they do for my own mother who needs full-time care and yet doesn't want to be in any sort of a living situation, like a nursing home. But it's really hard because she also doesn't have any money, so it's there's not funds to just, these homes are so expensive. These actual senior living facilities, it's insane, and it's a total business. And so that's a whole nother, can of worms. But where I started with this and what you touched on at the end of what you were just saying is on the emotional side of it, right? It is draining. And I think the reason it's so draining is because, yes, it requires a lot of energy, but it's also the emotions that we go through in seeing our parents decline and knowing that they're not going to be here that much longer. It's really, really hard to see that. And I saw this in my own dad dying, and the sickness that he had my whole life. When I used to think about him leaving, I would just tear up, and it would happen every few days. Cause I think in my heart, I knew he wouldn't stay forever, but then I just never really expected it to happen either, and the emotions that you go through when you think about those things, it's people don't realize their thoughts are so powerful and what that does to you and what a spectrum it sends you on, or a spiral it sends you on. And then then you have to go be you in the world. Right. So talk to me a little bit about your experience of that. What's your capacity to manage your emotions in that way?
Yeah, that is something I have to check often, right?
Yeah.
And check in with myself. And as I mentioned before, I'm still trying to figure out that part of the journey. Because when left unchecked, it's hard. To your point of emotions, you're grieving, right? And sometimes it's a long grief period. When you're watching someone in particular with dementia suffer for a long period of time, and you don't even know how long, right? There is sort of a start and a theoretical end to a grief period with an acute illness, but with these long-term diseases, you're struggling every day with the roller coaster that is the disease process itself. And then you have trouble finding joy in being happy when you are supposed to be in this phase of life that's happy, right? Celebrating the wins of your children and the development and milestones, and then you have your career and you want to do that too. And so it's a tenuous process of making sure that you're still allowing yourself to sort of disconnect. I definitely have put more boundaries up in that space than I did initially, because I would find myself completely drained with things that would, logistics and doctor's appointments and navigating, the phone calls, like you mentioned, would happen all the time. But every time a text or a ping would come in, you're like, thing, right? On top of the list of things you already have to manage. And so how can you put up boundaries? And then asking for help. And that has been a thing for me personally, but in the space of managing my mom in particular, how can I make sure that when I show up, I'm in the best place to be present with her and not frustrated by the logistics, right? And we talk about that with caregiving of our own children and other things, but being better about allowing for that
Mm-hmm.
and creating a space for it so that I'm not perpetually drained by it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because your career has been a lot about it seems to me like, like solving problems, and leading through like complexity.
Hmm.
And yet like there's so many problems that a disease like dementia presents that just can't be
Can't,
solved. And
can't
so
solve
like
it.
the dichotomy is there for you. Like
And
that's
what you said about, just elderly care management and it just, and I'm in healthcare and I can't solve them, right?
yes.
And I can't make this better and I want to make this perfect, like, and I can't. And so
Mhm.
sort of releasing that to allow
Mhm.
for what's happening. It's not my fault. And, just giving grace in that space has been
Yeah.
a journey. It's not easy. It's
Mhm.
unforgiving at times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a process, and so many people are going through it in different phases
Mhm.
of sort of this grief caregiving process.
They sure are. Yeah. Well, I love that you're shining light on this for people because it's such an important conversation. What would you say about how you and your husband have navigated, some of these demands like together, and where has that really been, beneficial, and how are you supporting each other in that?
Yeah, I think that's hard, right? We
Mhm.
both very demanding jobs,
Mhm.
um, and we both enjoy work. So I think that's
Mhm.
different. Not
Mhm.
everybody is in that space. We both feel it's important for our kids to see us contributing in different ways and
Yeah.
outside of the home. Um, but I think when the way in which we show up for our family is
Mhm.
important to us, and that our kids see it, and so
Mhm.
we show up for our parents as much as we can. We want them to see them, even in the ugly stuff, right? And
Mhm.
so that some of the ugly stuff, as it relates to my mom, or the hard things, or the hard decisions,
Mhm.
it's important that they see that too, and we're both in it together.
Yeah.
And and that takes trust and relying on each other for both of those, parts of it. Um,
Mhm.
Making sure that we're part of each other's decision making for the tough things. Uh,
Yeah.
it's not just one person alone on an island, which it can be easy to do because you feel like it's your burden. Uh,
Right.
so
Right. Do you think, are there conversations that, I mean, you've been going through this for quite some time. So are there conversations that you might suggest that someone who knows that this is upcoming for either their spouse or, their parents or parent, that they should have in like a way that they could start talking about it early?
yeah, I have a laundry list actually that you asked.
Yeah.
Um, it's never too early to, in particular, and while I'm speaking explicitly about dementia, but I think if you're approaching a season that might be the end of life, or not even in preparation for something that might happen with that,
Mhm.
there's a list of things that I wish I had, right? And
Yeah.
on the wish I had list with my mom in particular, I wish I could have articulated with a clearer mind for her some of her wishes, so that
Mhm.
as I act on her behalf with my brother, that we're doing it, even if it doesn't feel right for us, we're doing it for her clear-minded wishes.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't think there's ever too early a time to make this a comfortable conversation with your parents or a spouse or anyone else you may have to go through this with, making sure
Mhm.
that the logistics of their life are in order. And I can't emphasize that enough. It is so burdensome as a caregiver to carry the weight of finances and unraveling, your personal assets and things like that, which actually is much easier
Mhm.
when you are capable and in your
Yeah.
capacities to do. So having those conversations early, even though they're uncomfortable, but doing it in a light where you're really honoring the person. And
Mhm.
I think as I've recognized in this journey, it becomes harder and harder to do, where you almost feel like the person and the personality may change, and you might be honoring
Mhm.
a different person than you knew. That and their wishes may not be the wishes that they once were. It
Right.
becomes really hard and burdensome for the caregiver because you're unsure of the direction forward.
Yeah.
Want to make that as clear as possible. And that is, the biggest advice I could give.
Yeah. I think it's such good advice because a lot of people you don't think about this until it's happening. And
Or
then
you
by
don't
that time,
want
it's like,
to.
oh,
It's
wish I
scary.
would have done this differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
such good advice. What do
Hmm.
you think about, thinking about like the business world and, organizations and workplaces out there. What do you think organizations are maybe not getting right still when it comes to caregiving responsibilities that their employees and their leaders have?
Yeah. That I think that we've done better and not perfectly. And I would say I've been through the seasonal life of having children and maternity leaves and FMLA and that type of thing. I think acknowledging this phase of life, which has now become longer and more extended for so many people, support in this space, dialogue in this space, conversations, and it is really, really important. I think there are so many going through it, but we really don't recognize that burden, if you will, that individual on your team may be carrying with them while they walk into work. As I started sharing more of my story with my teams that I have led, the amount of folks who are saying, yeah, me too. And then we'll start to come to you and say, you know what, I need today off. I've got to go. My mom's in the hospital. Of course, right? What they may have hidden or what they may not be as transparent around that story, if you don't create that safe space for them. So how can employers make that as equally as safe a space as, I'm taking time off to help raise a newborn child? It is just as important. It is culturally not as, comfortable maybe right now, but it's a long and dynamic process for all of us and different for each of us.
Right. And being able to just be transparent about it too, without guilt.
Yes.
Because I think when people feel guilty, like, first of all, guilt is such a low vibe emotion to have to carry, and it will leak out, it will show up in your relationships or your demeanor or your tone. Like, it's going to show up somewhere because it's a lot to carry. It's not pretty, and so I see that all the time. I've seen that in myself in the past. I'm just thinking about a story of a friend / client who was telling me recently she's, looking for her next role, and she's a very senior executive, and she had to take about 9-10 months off. And then by that time she was ready to kind of get back into the working world. And that time that she took off, the reason she had to take it off is, one, she had to transition her parents who are out of state into elderly care and all the things that come with that of what you're describing. And she also had a major home renovation kind of gone wrong and just had so much to manage with that. And she's like, I can't even imagine being in my former role and having all of this responsibility. There's no way I could have done it. And we all know what that's like, right?
Yeah.
So as she's re-entering the workforce, she was saying, this is the story that I'm sharing. I'm telling people that I kind of stepped into early retirement and now I'm ready to come back. And I said, no, that is not your story. And I said, and she's like, well, how about sabbatical? I said, that's also not your story. I said, your story is your truth. Your truth is there were two major shifts and transitions in my life of which I needed to fully be present for and prioritize. And thankfully they were happening simultaneously. But the one thing that no longer fit was work. And I am fortunate that I had the ability, I could step away from that for a bit to give these couple of things my time and attention. But why not be honest?
Right.
Why not just share that, hey, these are the things that I'm moving through. And, I did take a break and now I'm ready to give it my full energy again. Now I'm more ambitious than ever because I've got these things squared away. I don't think enough people have that transparent, I don't know, that vulnerable, transparent discussion with others where they're willing to put themselves out there in that way because it's scary.
Yeah. Or you think the perception may be, well, she can't handle that. What else can't she handle? Right. Yeah. And you get that voice in your head that articulates that over and over, and you need to, put that away. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. So in this chapter of life, what are you, or maybe it's how are you intentionally fitting in, the things that do matter to you that you maybe in the past have put last? So things like your movement you talked about. How do you put your family first when you want to? How do you put your mom first when you want to? How are you making those sort of in the moment choices that are just the right thing to do?
It's a intentional and thoughtful process. Whereas before, I think we've all gone through phases of life where your calendar runs you and you're reactive and it feels chaotic. And I think in the last few years, probably 3 or 4, once I started realizing how much sort of external control had over me in driving my work and driving my personal life, it's just more about direct intentionality and deliberate things. And then there's an element of accepting complete imperfection in the process. Don't,
Yeah.
get me wrong. Like I mentioned, like the family time has been redefined, as my kids enter high school. I'm grateful for a 15-minute swing by dinner now, whereas before it had to be, X, Y, and Z. So I think you have to redefine too and recalibrate as you go. So family time looks different now, and I'm grateful for what we redefine it as. I think the time with my mom, I'm very intentional about, because as I mentioned, like if it goes a different way, it's very draining. So I try to pop in, I bring the kids, I watch her smile, we keep it positive, and then we leave instead of overstaying and over planning and sort of realizing that those things were more potentially meaningful and draining to me than it was actually to her. So sort of just reflecting on some of those things, being really mindful with the time. And then I think focusing my time a whole lot more on connection, just being with the people you want to be with, that fills my cup. So filling the time in between with those things has changed sort of how I view, I don't know, everything really.
Yeah. And have you learned to cut out things that don't serve you?
I've been working on it.
That's a hard one. I know.
My kids will say it ends up being more like, yeah, that practice doesn't serve me. So, we don't go.
Which is very true. Like not all practices are
Yeah.
meaningful. Not for you.
I don't know if the coaches need to hear that, but yeah. But truthfully, at the end of the day, if this is making our lives totally chaotic and you're stressed, like, what are we doing? And having just a more practical lens on that for them, but for our family and for us, so that it ends up feeling just like the vibe in our family, the way that we wanted to create it. Right. And so that's been more of the cutout, or taking a look at things and saying, I don't really know why we're doing this. Like, do we have to? Has it been transformative? No. Can we do better? For sure. And as we've continued to sort of move into different phases of childhood rearing, it's different every time. And so you sort of have to relens it and think about it differently. But I think we try to. And, we approach a lot of it with humor, which helps a lot.
Yeah, I think humor is a cure-all for so many things. I mean, sometimes I just get my fix on like, a couple of, stupid Instagram memes that I see. And I'm like, oh, that did it for me. I just needed to laugh for a second.
And like your day is made, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know. I can look forward to like a happy hour for 3 weeks.
For sure.
For sure. So last question, I think we can leave people with this, but what would you want people to know about time, energy, or intentionality? These are 3 things that you've talked a lot about today.
What wasn't said today and what most people know about me is about 17 years ago, I had a pretty near-death experience with my firstborn child. I took that moment, and from that moment on, to live very differently. In the last few years, though, without intentionality, without deliberation, without really being mindful, it's very easy to slip into old patterns of behavior, to allow sort of your life and the chaos around it to really drive what defines you, your values, and what is driving you every day. And so I think that it's just as simple as, life is short, and live every element of it to the fullest, because you mentioned it earlier, like you just don't know. And you shouldn't have to have a near-death experience to appreciate that. And so it truly is. Life is short.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, what an intense experience. And I mean, also like just to live beyond that and to be able to say there's a different way to show up in your life, right? And to know that you're going to lose yourself along the way sometimes, like you have, and most people do. I don't know anyone that hasn't, but you can catch yourself making those choices that are leading you to misalignment. You can catch yourself making those choices that are leading you to drain yourself of your own life force, right? And then get back on track. You don't have to stay there. And that's the opportunity that everybody has every day.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. Okay, Kersten, this was really just such a enriching conversation on a topic that I know so many people are going to really appreciate and connect with. So thank you for being here and for being so open.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. Thank you so much.
And everyone, we will include Kersten's LinkedIn in the show notes, so you can connect with her there, reach out, let her know how much it meant to you for her to share her story with all of us. If you can please like, share, subscribe, rate the show, it will help get it to more and more people who will benefit from it. And until next time, be well.